Hey guys, what's up? It is your race director, Sean Bland, Sean Michael, aka Run Bum, race director and owner of Run Bum Races. We are here at Albert's Lodge on Mount Mitchell with the Crest in our backdrop here. You can see Big Tom and I believe Mount Craig in the background. So basically, I just wanted to give everybody a course breakdown from the 10K to the 25K to the 50K. So what I'm going to start off with is the 10K, which is also the first it's 7 miles. It's also the first 7 miles for the 50K. So then we'll go 10K to 50K. And while we're talking about the 50K, we'll do the 25K, which is the second half of the 50K. All right, and we'll break that down. So first and foremost, this is a very, very extreme race. It is not really a trail run unless you are like an elite 1 to 2% of the runners that will be doing this. Pretty much everybody will be walking all of the uphill or hiking it. If you've never done a trail race, this cannot be your first trail race, period. We have a very strict 3.5 hour time limit. If you do not finish in that, you will be recorded as a DNF, do not finish. So really, this race, there's multiple points in it where you're kind of on all fours climbing. So if you are elderly and you think you can't do that, if you are overweight and you think that may be very, very hard to do, there's no judgment to any of that. It is probably not a good idea for you to do this event on any of the distances, period. You will be fully exposed and climbing on short sections. It is not all of it. It's maybe 1% or less of it where you can be on sections like that, but it's very precarious. You could fall, get very hurt and or killed. That is not to be understated, okay? Now, again, 99.99% of this race is just very hard up and down, some very, very technical stuff. So I'm telling you this as a friend, as a race director, and as somebody from a safety standpoint that wants to keep everyone safe, happy, and healthy, including the local search and rescue and volunteer firefighters, okay? So if you do not feel capable of doing that, please do not show up. I'm begging you. Every year there's at least 1 or 2 people who are out there for 5 hours on this 10K that have zero business being out there. This cannot be a couch to 10K. If you are not in the best shape that you can be in, if you're not used to going up and down mountains, do not come for any of these distances. Said this for the last 2 minutes. Cannot overstate that enough. Okay, with that being said, we start off on a gravel road right at the trailhead. You immediately start up. The first mile is very steep. It's 20% plus incline on an old logging road bed. There are a couple dips where it kind of levels out and goes down for 10, 20 feet, okay? Then when you eventually get to this big rock face, you go to the right around it, that's when the real adventure starts. It's about a mile or so in, maybe a little more. That next half mile, you gain 1,000 feet in a half mile. This is where you're doing a lot of the hands-on climbing. You're just straight up. You're almost grabbing roots in front of you. For our 50K as well as our 10K, you are not allowed to use poles for this. Reason for that being, just for the climb, is that people are so close behind you that you will actually end up hitting the person in the face behind you. It has happened before, which is why we have that rule there. Okay, you also need to have your hands free to reach out and grab something or arrest yourself if you start falling. Okay, you know, it's very easy. Just follow all of our flagging and markings. We'll explain that race morning. That middle half mile is the most treacherous. It lets up slightly. There are a couple sections where it goes down to maybe only 10% grade. All right, the top third of the mountain is also very steep. There's some nice viewpoints in there. Just past our first viewpoint, eventually comes into a place we call Fat Man Squeeze. There's like a really tight thing you kind of got to squeeze through. Just after that, there's a little down climb. Be careful on that, especially if you're a faster runner. You could launch yourself off like a 6-7 foot drop. So be careful. Yeah, most people take about like a very fast time to get to the top of the climb, where you open up into this beautiful view, weather permitting, into a meadow. Typically, fastest times are about 45 minutes. That's if you're running most of it. If you're a normal person, like normal people, average runner, like everybody, a lot of people running, you're looking at somewhere between an hour and 15 to an hour and 40 minutes on the climb alone. Okay, once you hit that meadow area up top, you are, and by the way, I'll go back a little bit. If you're a slower back of the pack runner, you're looking at 2.5 hours to get up just the climb itself. So somewhere between an hour 15 and 2.5 hours. So imagine you're going all out anaerobic assault for up to 2.5 hours. Are you prepared for that? The answer is no. Again, I invite you please not to come, because I don't want you to be a burden and have to be medevaced or whatever. Everyone thinks, oh, I'll just stop up here. No, it's like there's one way in, one way out. You're either going through or you're going back. Any rescue up here could take up to 10 hours. At that point, you're hypothermic. You could die from hypothermia. You'll be out of food and water. You'll be dehydrated. So there's a lot of very bad scenarios, and please help us. You have to be, this is a semi-autonomic race. You have to be self-sufficient, okay? So as you top out on this meadow, you're gonna take a right on the Crest Trail. There's a half mile of what looks like flat on an elevation profile. It's very hard to run. It's kind of rutted out, grass clumps. Yeah, and then once you pop back in the woods, from right there, I think there's maybe 5 feet of climbing all the way there to the 10K finish, or rather the 50K turnaround. It is an old logging road bed, old mining road actually, and you drop down and it's like a never-ending fun, bombable downhill. If you like downhill, God, this downhill is for you. About halfway down every time, my quads are like, okay, how are we still going downhill? Why are we still going downhill? So that always happens. So just if you're in the 50K, do not bomb this. Really hold back. You've got 3 more strenuous, arduous downhills. This is the most runnable downhill, I think, of all 3 for the 50K. But as you're coming down, you'll eventually get a creek on your left. Actually, the water that you cross over up top, and there's a spring about 1/3 of the way down. That spring feeds that whole creek. Eventually a bunch of springs, but that's the start of it. It's called Boland's Creek. So at the very, very bottom of it, for the last mile or so, you parallel Boland's Creek. And at the very end, you go through the creek, and that's where you finish on the other side for the 10K. For the 50K, we have an aid station there. You're gonna turn around, go back through the creek, climb all the way back up the crest. Make sure, at least on the way back up, on the way down, you can probably avoid the spring. On the way back up, if you do not stop and fill water and get a full belly of water, fully fill up and have extra water, you will run out of water guaranteed before you get to Colbert's aid station. There is another spot that is a trickle. We do have labeled there as well. It may or may not be flowing. Right now, a lot of this stuff is very dry. We've had a very, very, very dry spring. We're on like a 2-year drought up here. So that is something, most of the springs are still flowing, but it's just something to take note of. So as you're climbing back up, it is a very runnable, inviting uphill. Again, if you're doing the 50K, just hike. Just hike. If you're an elite runner, run, hike, run, hike, run, hike, run, hike. And it's obvious because the grade kind of goes up and down. If you're not an elite runner, do not run this. You're just going to destroy yourself for the rest of the race. Okay? Make sure you're getting in food, hydration, whatever. You're staying cool. These springs, anytime you see water, cool off if it's warm. Take the time. If you don't take the time and fill up water, cool off, you're going to screw yourself. It may take a couple minutes on the front end, but on the back end, it's going to add so much time that you're making up. I guarantee you this. I've won races before while people just blaze out in front of me, even during like trail half marathons, where I stop, I lay in a creek and cool off, because I know keeping my body temperature low and getting fluids in me is more important than speed, because eventually the heat and humidity will catch up. So once you get back into the open area on the crest, you've already done this. You have that half mile back to where the first climb was. You go past this now on the crest. This next 2.5, 3 miles is undulating. on a from a standpoint of like a profile standpoint, it looks very easy. I can assure you is anything but. If you're an elite runner here, you're probably running 10 minutes a mile. If you're not an elite runner, you're probably doing 15 to 20 minutes a mile. It's very rocky, lots of sharp turns. There's some climbing up, climbing down, some exposed spots where you can fall literally to your death. We have that blocked off, so be careful on that. But yeah, it is not a fast section. It's also, as long as the weather permits, it is probably the most beautiful section of the whole course along the crest. And you're doing these steep little climbs, steep little downs, steep little climbs. And once you get on top of what is called Winter Star, which is not noted, but once you get on top of Winter Star, you have a 3,800 foot downhill all the way to Colbert's. Once you hit Colbert's Ridge Trail off the crest, there's a sharp left. Again, it's all flagged, whatever. Maybe a quarter mile, half mile down, there's that trickle of the spring. Again, I know you're going downhill, but it will only get warmer and warmer and warmer, and there's no opportunities for water towards the bottom until you get to the aid station. Stop, cool off, get water, then make your way down. This downhill, once you get on Colbert's Ridge, the first mile and a half is what I would call extremely treacherous. It's bouldering kind of down, moving through some stuff. You're not going fast. A 15-minute mile here, you're moving extremely quick, and it means you're running. So the fact, if you're getting the hint of this whole course, you're not really making up time on the flat sections or the downhill. So you just got to be consistently power hiking, moving, staying hydrated, staying on top of food, nutrition, and staying cool. You have 15 hours to do this course. A lot of you will use all of that. Okay, so as you're coming down Colbert, the bottom mile and a half or two is very runnable. Again, if you're an elite runner, you can bomb this very hard. If you're a regular person, be careful on blowing yourself up. Once you get to Colbert, you have a nice aid station, you have crew access, and you have your drop bag, okay? Which you brought. Of course, you brought your drop bags to the start of the race, whether you're staying here at Albert's or you're staying or you're getting dropped off or driving and parking at the finish line at Neal's Creek Field. But you have that, and then you have the easiest section of the entire race, which is between Colbert's Ridge aid station, Colbert's aid station, and Buncombe. Okay, there's like maybe 300 feet of climbing in that whole thing. So my suggestion is, if you've been on top of your hydration, if you've been on top of your nutrition, if you have the ability to do a quick aid station turnover, you should be running the 1 mile that is flat down the road, just jogging it while you have everything together. You then hit a quick little uphill on a gravel road to Buncombe Horse Trail trailhead. Okay, now this is where the 25K starts. Okay, we drop people off, they walk up, and then we'll start at the trailhead. So listen up. All right. If you're in the 50K, you should be kind of walking and doing what you can, but not going too hard to get to the Buncombe aid station. Where the Buncombe aid station is 2.5 miles past Colbert, okay? From that aid station, you are 90% all climbing all the way to the summit of Mount Mitchell. And before you hit Mount Mitchell summit, you will hit our aid station, okay? So I think it's like a 7.5, 8 mile climb. It's brutal, okay? If you've paced yourself properly, this won't be as hard. If you haven't paced yourself properly, this will be like you dying every single step until you get to the Mitchell aid station. You'll be puking, you'll be dizzy, you'll be just completely messed up. Through this section, even if you are running the 25K, right? 25K, that first 1.5 miles to Buncombe aid station, which you shouldn't need, is super easy. It is very easy, okay? It's rolling hills. You pass through Middle Creek, which is nice. If you're on the 50K, even if you're 25K, consider laying down in this, cool off, take a couple minutes, get cool, right? Get that core temperature down, not just like that. Take a couple minutes. hit the the Buncombe aid station, and it's climbing from here. The good part about the climbing is it kind of, I'll divide this whole climb to Mount Mitchell into quarters. The first quarter is little up, little easier, little up, little easier, little up, little easier. If you're not used to running uphill, walk all this, period. If you're doing the 50K or the 25K and you're not a mountain goat, walk all of this, all right? Take it easy. The climb goes on forever, okay? Once you hit what I call switchback hell, which is your second quarter of this, it gets steep but consistent. There's like 44 switchbacks, okay? We also have a spring labeled in here. I'll have multiple springs. Fill up there, make sure you're getting water and stuff like that, okay? With that being said, once you pop out of the switchbacks, you'll kind of see a rocky outcropping view to your left. That's how you know you're done or you're getting to the top of most of the climbing, okay? It'll level out and you'll be in the middle of fir trees. At this point, it gets easier for about 1.5 miles, minimal climbing. At some point thereafter, you enter an open grassy roadbed that is pretty janky, lots of clumpy grass and stuff like that. You will eventually hit a small out and back to Maple Camp Bald. Okay, there's an epic view. You'll see that, take some photos, turn around, and you're going back on the grassy roadbed. This is pretty runnable until you hit what is called Big Tom Gap Trail. It is a sharp right turn. There's also your last water source there for a very long time. You need to fully fill up here, regardless of what distance you're doing. Cool off for sure. Big Tom Gap Trail is probably the hardest section of the entire course for the 50K and 25K. It's like 0.8 of a mile. You gain about 900 feet. You're straight up. Part of it, you're up like an old creek bed. You're kind of climbing up what could be a waterfall if it's pouring rain. And then you take a left onto the Crest Trail, which you're like, oh, cool, I've gained the top of it. You have not. You now go uphill from that. There's fixed ropes going up the backside of Big Tom. You're gonna be cursing me the whole way, I know it. And once you gain the top of Big Tom, you're rolling lots of steep up, steep down, going all the way to our Mitchell parking lot, aid station just before that. Once you hit that aid station, you kind of run along the grass of that, of the parking lot up there at Mount Mitchell Summit area. You take a left, you go downhill down Balsam Nature Trail. You take a right on Mitchell Trail. And now you have a small 200 or so foot climb on the Mitchell Trail, which is an out and back all the way to the summit. You'll hit a paved path. Once you hit the summit, take it all in. You're at the highest point east of the Mississippi. It is epic as long as the weather is permitting. You now have like a 5.5 mile downhill that is treacherous to say the least. So technical. The bottom 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles is pretty runnable. Besides that, it's bouldering downhill. Once you hit Black Mountain Campground, or once you hit a gravel road, you cross over. It's crushed gravel for 1/4 mile. You cross over a bridge. This is all pretty easy. And guess what? The climb that everyone hates that no one plans for, you climb up the Mountains to Sea Trail about 300 feet or so before having a gradual downhill all the way to the finish over another 1.5 miles, where you finish in the field that you likely parked in at the beginning. So that is your course. For all of that, please make sure you're taking the time to filter water. If not, you'll run out of water. Make sure you have all your mandatory gear. Make sure you read everything on our website. Make sure you're overly prepared. And most of all, take photos, have fun, talk to the people around you. We love you guys, and we'll see you at the race.